Disciplinary expertise to drive innovation, growth, and impact, with a strong foundation in technical writing, leather works, and sustainable agriculture. She excels in business analysis, strategy development, and execution. She's dedicated She's a dedicated change agent, passionate about leveraging skills to create value, foster collaboration, and propel success. Okay, Janet, are you here? Hello.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, right. So,
I should continue, right?
yes, I'm coming. Sorry, let me. Can you guys see my screen? Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I can see your
Okay,
screen now.
okay. Um, yeah, okay. Okay, you can start now.
All right, thank you very much. Um, you did not almost murder my name. My name is Okay, not Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction, so I don't necessarily have to go through that again. My name is Janet Okay. So today we'll be looking at database mining and article searching, structure of thesis, and chapter 5. So I believe the tutors that have come before me, they have done justice to chapter 1 to 4, and I'm sure we have learned a whole lot. So we'll just dive into today's business. So in today's information age, we have vast amounts of data that are generated daily, and extracting valuable insights from this data set is very, very important. And database mining, which is also known as data mining, is the process of discovering patterns, correlations, and insights from large datasets. Meanwhile, article searching involves finding relevant information from various sources, including academic journals, articles, and websites, newspaper, and several other sources. Can you go to the next slide, please? Next. So in this session, we'll be looking at the techniques, the tools, and strategies that are used for effective database mining and article searching. We are going to cover topics such as data extraction, information retrieval, and as well as tips for searching academic databases, evaluating the sources, and avoiding common pitfalls. And by the end of this training, I want to believe we will be equipped with the skills to uncover hidden gems in databases and articles and make informed decisions based on data-driven insights. So now we'll start from database mining, which involves discovering patterns, correlations, and insights from large data sets. And the major techniques used are data extraction, data analysis, data visualization. Some of the tools we use, or let me say few of the tools that are used for this particular activity are SQL, software like Excel and Python, and R. I used SPSS for my own project. So I don't really know that SQL, but I know it's one of the tools that are used for database mining and all of that. And the major goal when we want to go into the act of database mining, the major goal that we should have at the back of our mind that we want to go and do is to uncover hidden relationship in trends, the relationship and trends in data. Okay, for example now, in literature, what has this author said about this particular information? What has this other author said? There are several authors that have said something about this particular study. What is the correlation between all these articles? What are the trends? What is common in them? What is conflicting in their work? So that's what database mining practically does. Next slide, please. Then article searching. Article searching now for project work as a final year student. For you to successfully carry out your experiment, you need to do literature review. You go to literature, you look for works that are related to what you want to do. Whatever it is you want to do might not be new. So there are several people that have done something related. You might even see someone that have done exactly the same thing. So that's why you have to go to article session, to go through materials, you look for journals, you look for articles in what you are intending to do in your project. So the first point, like academic journals, articles, you can also make use of news source information about the field you are trying to carry. Techniques you can use in article session is the use of keyword, the use of Boolean operators, and citation tracking. Usually, keyword searching is like the major thing that majority of people use when they are looking for article, and it is actually very helpful. This way, it's going to give you everything related to your topic, so to speak. For example, for the purpose of this for the purpose of this class, I will be using my own project, my final year project as an example. The topic is reproductive toxicity of bioremediated crude oil contaminated soil in mice using sperm morphology assay. Now, in this project, for me to successfully carry out article searching, and I want to use keyword searching, when I go to whichever source or database that I want to use, using keywords now, the keywords in this my topic is number one, reproductive toxicity. Then number two, bioremediation. Number three, I can even go into crude oil and see what crude oil does to the environment, crude oil contamination, and also I can also look at mice. What are the characteristics of a mouse? What does a mouse look like? How is it related to humans? Because this project practically wants to see the possible effects that contaminated soil will have on humans. So I'm using mice as my laboratory specimen. How is mice related to humans? Why do I decide to use mice? Why can't I just go and look for one human being and use it as my experiment? I can also search for sperm morphology assay. So these are keyword searching. These are keywords in my topic that I can easily use to get relevant information from databases. Now, the tools that are used for this is academic databases and search engines. The academic databases that are available are Google Scholar, PubMed, JSTOR, and several others like that. You can also use search engines. Also, there are websites that you can use as well, that you can just go to and make use of your keywords, and easily you get several articles that have been published that are related. Then the Boolean operators. Now, these Boolean operators are actually very amazing. It helps you to streamline your search, so you don't get things that are not necessarily important. Things that are not important to your work will not be brought to your search. For example, from the topic, reproductive toxicity of bioremediated crude oil contaminated soil. Now I can use my keywords, reproductive toxicity. Then I can insert my Boolean operator, and I can use the Boolean operators are and, or, and not. So those are the three Boolean operators. Now, if I want to search and making use of my keyword searching in my search engine or whatever tool I decide to use, could be academic databases or websites or search engines, anyone, I can decide to say, okay, search for reproductive toxicity and crude oil contamination. So every article or every information that the search engine is going to bring for me is only going to be related to reproductive toxicity and crude oil contamination. Anything outside these two keywords, it's not going to bring it for me. Now, the Boolean operator or. Now, if I search for reproductive toxicity or crude oil contaminated or crude oil contamination, it's either going to give me articles that contain reproductive toxicity alone, or it will give me articles that contain crude oil contamination alone. There's also possibility to bring articles that will contain the two, but it will be more of articles that talk about each of those keywords separately. There's possibility it also brings articles that talk about the two in one document, in one article. So the Boolean operator not. Now, if I want to look for, I'm using my keyword searching now, reproductive toxicity, not toxicity. Now, that is telling the search engine that anything that has to do with toxicity that does not relate to reproductive or reproduction, don't bring it. I hope you understand. I'm searching for reproductive toxicity, not toxicity. There are several other toxicities that can occur. It could be brain toxicity or whatever part of the body, anything that can be toxic to any other part of the body, those ones exist. But what you are concerned about majorly is reproductive toxicity. So you are telling the search engine that anything that does not have to do with reproductive, that does not have reproductive at before the toxicity, don't bring it for me. Or you tell the search engine that crude oil contamination, not petrol contamination. Now, petrol is no more a crude oil, it's a refined product already. So whatever results that your search engine is going to bring to you is only going to contain crude oil contamination. Articles that talk about crude oil contamination is not going to bother you with other things that has to do with crude oil. It might even be the end product of crude oil. Since you did not include end product of crude oil, it's not going to bring those ones for you. It's only going to bring you articles that talk about crude oil contamination. Moving on, next slide, please. Now, structure of a thesis. This majorly is how to organize your report. Okay, you are done with your project work and you want to present it in a report. You write your report. How do you organize, how do you arrange your report that will make your reader interested in what you are reading? Now, there are basic, or should I call it basic now, or a dogma rule for the structure of thesis, depending on the aspects or the field of study you have. Usually in science, you have chapter 1, which is your introduction, chapter 2, which is your literature review, chapter 3 contains your methodology, chapter 4, you have your results, and chapter 5, you have your discussion, conclusion, and recommendation. After that one, you have your references. And then before your chapter 1, you have your preface. Your preface contains your dedication, acknowledgement, certification, list of plates, list of tables, table of contents, and all of those. Now, if you are an history student, your chapter 1 will include your introduction, your literature review, and your methodology in your chapter 1. That's for history students. Then your chapter 2, from your chapter 2, you start talking about your body of work. And for, I think, maybe education people too, you have your chapter 1 and your chapter 2 as literature review. Your chapter 1 is introduction, your chapter 2 is literature review. Then your chapter 3 is your methodology. Chapter 4 will be the body of your work and your conclusion. You don't have chapter 5. But in science, you have 5 major chapters, which is your introduction, literature review, methodology, results. Then your chapter 5 will be we have your discussion, your conclusion, and after your chapter 5, you have your references, your list of references. Now, how you organize your references is dependent on probably your school or your field of study. There are several referencing methods that you can use. There's APA, there's MLA, there's Chicago, and several like that. Now, the major goal of having a structure for your thesis is to organize research into a logical and coherent sections. Arrangements that will make sense to whoever pick up your report. You don't have your results first before you have your introduction. You don't have your conclusion before you have your methodology. Now, moving on, we are going to look at chapter 5 now. And the major things in your chapter 5 is your discussion. Next slide, please. Your discussion, your conclusion, your recommendation. So for your discussion, the major goal of your discussion is to explain what you have found during the course of your research. You explain what you have found, you relate it to literature. What has people that have worked on something related to your work, what have they said about this thing? Is it conflicting, or is it in agreement with what others have done, or is it conflicting? Is your results what people have been saying? Is it true? Is your result confirming what others have said about that particular thing before? And once you have told us all those ones, then you tell us the implication of your study. Okay, if this has happened and this person has said it before too, that this is the situation, so this means that, then you give us your inference. So majorly, your discussion relates research findings with trends in literature and also provides inference on research findings. Next slide, please. Then you have your conclusion. Your conclusion summarizes main findings and implications. Okay, you have done your research and you've gotten your results. You've made your inference based on literature. So you are now concluding that what? Okay. For example, going back to the example we are using, reproductive toxicity of bioremediated crude oil contaminated soil in mice using sperm morphology assay. Now, I've already carried out this experiment and I found out that, okay, this crude oil contaminated soil, even though it has been treated with the method of bioremediation, this contaminated soil still have the ability to induce change in sperm cells of a mouse. So in conclusion, I already have my conclusion. Even though there is reduction in the toxic materials that are present in the soil, toxic elements in the soil, even though there is the reduction, it is still capable of inducing toxicity, of inducing damage to sperm cells in a man. in a mouse. That will be my conclusion. And also, my conclusion is also going to restate the research question and objective. What was the major aim of my research in the first place? Is to find out if this bioremediated soil is still capable of inducing change. After stating that again, then I'll tell us that, okay, after I've carried out this experiment, I found out that this soil is still capable of inducing change in the morphology of a sperm cell in a mouse. And then another thing that a conclusion does is to provide final thoughts and recommendations. Okay, well, now we have seen that this crude oil contaminated soil is still capable of inducing change. Then you provide recommendation. Maybe people should vacate the environment, or maybe they should find another means of treating the soil further so that the place will be conducive for life of any form. So the major goal is to leave reader with lasting impression and call to action. Okay, now that you have concluded that, okay, this soil is dangerous, the environment is not suitable or is not fit for life, especially that of human being, because it can cause aberration in sperm cells, which is in turn going to affect the reproduction of whoever is staying there. So people should either vacate the environment or look for a means of treating the soil further to make the place conducive for living. Anybody that reads your conclusion should be able to see what you are bringing out to people, to be able to see what you are advising people on based on these findings of your results. There's a current publication, there's a current article that Dr. Alabi published on noodles, if noodles is toxic or not, the seasoning in our noodles that we eat, is it toxic or not? As the conclusion of that work is that, okay, this seasoning that they put in noodles, it is toxic. It is capable of inducing genetic aberrations in sperm cells. And at the end, they wrote that it is advised that people consume Indomie noodles with caution. Now, it's not telling you that you should stop eating noodles. And it's not saying that, you can keep on eating noodles. But the major point that was brought to mind is eat it with caution. So if you want to consume it, fine. If you don't want to consume it again, fine. But if you are consuming it, consume it with caution. So that's the major thing that your conclusion is going to do. Is going to make a lasting impression on your reader and a call to action. Next slide, please. Now, your recommendation. Recommendation solely is to tell people what they could possibly do based on the findings or the results of your research work. It is actionable suggestions and it should be specific. Now, this is related to business. Whatever it is you are recommending to people should be specific. You should be straightforward. You don't go through the corners when you are making your recommendations. It should be measurable and it should be achievable. It should be relevant and time bound. Okay, now let me try and explain these keywords after the other. Now, specificity. Based on this topic, reproductive toxicity. Now I've carried out this experiment and I found out that it is still capable of inducing morphology aberration in sperm cells. I'm recommending that vacate the environment. I'm recommending that improve your treatment method, or you increase the period of time that you are going to use to treat the environment for it to be conducive. That is specific. I'm not saying that so you people shall know that this place is not conducive. you people shall know that Kinuko, I'm not trying to go through the corners. Tell them what they can do. However, it's not like you are enforcing it on them. Then it should be measurable. Is this something that actually makes sense? Can you measure what you are going to use? Can you put like a measurement on what you are going to, okay, maybe for example now, bioremediation, what amount of or what size of microorganisms will you be needing? What size of inoculum will you be needing to clean the environment? Is it measurable? Now, is it achievable? If it is achievable, then fine. Now, same bioremediation, there are several methods you can use in bioremediation. You can either use plants, you can use animal, and you can use microorganisms. Now, if you are suggesting that they use plants, how many plants are going to be used? How many stands of plants will be able to clean that environment? And within what period of time? Is it achievable? Is it a goal they can actually reach? If it is yes, then fine. Now, is this your recommendation? Is it relevant? Is it actually necessary? Is it important? Why should they do it? You should make them see why they should do what you are recommending. If what you are recommending is not relevant, then there's no point adding it to your recommendation. I can also add to my recommendation that further study should be carried out on the environment. Maybe, just maybe there is other means of bioremediation that they can use, or other means of cleaning the environment that might not necessarily even be a biological method. And time bound. For how long, what period of time are they going to use to evacuate the environment? Now, take for example, I said this particular street is polluted with crude oil, and I'm advising them to vacate the place. Somebody that has been working all his life and bought land in that place and built house, that is a landlord. You're advising the person to leave the place because the place is contaminated. Wherever that person is going to, the person is definitely going to start paying rent or move back to his daddy or mommy's house. So for how long are you advising them to vacate the place? If your recommendation is achievable and is measurable, then it should be time bound as well. Maybe for the period of 5 years or for the period of 3 years. Then individuals that are vacating the place, they will know that at the end of 5 years, we are coming back to our land. We are coming back to becoming landlords again, since we already have houses here. Now, your summary does a lot of work. This is where you pay attention to when you are concluding your research work. Next slide, please. Now, your summary is going to give a brief overview of your research. The normal font and line spacing you use in footer. I'm not sure. I think for every other academic write-up, if you are using Word documents, you use Times New Roman, font 12, double line spacing, like that, and you justify your page. Now, using page to measure your summary must not exceed 1 page. If you can make it less than a page sef, it will be sweet, so that you don't bore your reader. When your reader picks up your work, the person should be interested in reading that your summary. If your summary or your summary can also be your abstract and summary are used interchangeably in research work. Now, if a reader picks up your work and he or she opens the summary or your abstract and is seeing 2-3 pages, the person will not even be interested in reading, because it's too much. Let me kukuma read the whole thing. If I know I want to read the whole thing, why should I read abstract that is 3 pages? So your summary should be brief. not more than 250 words, maximum 1 page. You don't exceed 1 page for your summary. And your summary is going to highlight key findings, methodology, and conclusions. And your recommendation as well. Practically everything you have done in your research work, you are going to present it in your abstract. Starting from your introduction, you are going to state your introduction, you are going to state your aim, why are you doing this, then what method did you use, you state the method, what was the result you got, oh, this is what you got, then in relation to literature, what's the inference, then with your inference, what are you concluding, then after your conclusion, based on that result that you got, what are your recommendations? Then that's the end of your summary. And the main goal of your summary is to provide concise snapshots of your research. Is to show your reader everything that is in that your research. If the reader is not interested, oh, this work is interesting, then it can go ahead and flip the pages of your work and see what's there. But then your abstract should be able to give a detailed information of your research work. You don't write too much words, just straight to the point. Just give the bullet points in your summary. So now we are going to look at samples of a discussion, conclusion, and recommendation and abstracts from the research work. Please, can you please project? We are going to look at, let's look at the discussion first.
Sorry, I'm coming now.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen now. But
Okay.
can you try to zoom in so that people will be able to read through?
Should I still zoom
Thank you.
in?
It's okay this way. Yeah, it's fine like this. Thank you. So I don't want to bore us with the whole paragraph or the whole epistle. Let's start from the second. I'm just going to pick some lines there. from the second paragraph, he said, the result further showed statistically significant induction of sperm cell aberrations in all the tested concentrations. Sperm abnormalities have long been associated with male infertility and sterility in most species, and the structure play a substantial role in both fertilization and pregnancy outcome. And the person that has worked on this before is Sack in 2001. So this is me relating my findings able to induce aberration in sperm cells. Now, somebody has worked on this before, which is Sack in 2001. He said it plays a substantial role in both fertilization and pregnancy outcome. Now, the induction of abnormal sperm is thought to be as a result of point mutation. That's another person that has talked on it before. According to previous studies, small deletions, point mutations, and abnormal chromosomes are proposed as possible genetic causes of such alterations. Therefore, the constituents of the bioremediated soil are still capable of inducing genetic damage during spermatogenesis in the exposed mice. Now, I still went on and talked about other people that have worked on toxicity and mutation in sperm cells of mice, like Bruce and Edu, like Wyrobeck in 1983, like LLU in 2001, like Cooper in 2005. I was relating my findings, my results, with what these people has done. Let's move on to the conclusion, please. Now, others have worked on sperm morphology in mice, and they have been able to conclude or see or assert that substituents in crude oil contaminated crude oil are capable of inducing changes in sperm cells of a mice. I went on to treat that same soil and now still see if that soil that I've treated is still capable of doing it, of causing those aberrations. And I also find out that even after treatment, they are still capable of causing the aberrations in the sperm cells. Now, my conclusion now, the concentration of AS, CRM, GP, and PB were higher than the maximum allowable limits by regulatory organizations, while CDPH, N, and CU are within the range. The high concentrations of these and the presence of that in the bioremediated soil still induce aberration in the morphology of the mice sperm cells, and there was significant reduction in sperm counts of exposed animals. This study showed the negative impact of bioremediated crude oil contaminated soil with the capability of inducing genetic damage in sperm cells of exposed animals. Although there's this significant reduction in the level of contaminants present in the soil due to bioremediation that has taken place, the level of toxicity of the present compound still pose great genetic mutational threats to exposed animals. Now, that's my conclusion. I've made us understand that this is my result. I found out that there was aberration. And in my discussion, I have related it to the trends in literature. So person also said this. I found out that this and this and this and that. And so person also said the same thing too. I found out that, okay, arsenic is able to, in a particular concentration, is able to cause aberration in sperm cell. So person also found out the same results in his own research work in so year. Now I'm concluding now that even though me have carried out bioremediation on that same soil, the level of those contaminants, they still pose great threats. I'm concluding that that place is still not conducive for living. because it is still capable of inducing mutation in sperm cells. Now, let's look at the recommendation. Now, in my recommendation from this study, the following recommendations are important. Further studies should be carried out on somatic toxicity, as this study only considered reproductive toxicity. Now, if we check the characteristics of our recommendation, let's evaluate if my recommendations actually has the characteristics. The first characteristic is that it should be specific. What's the specificity of my first recommendation? It says further studies should be carried out. On what? On somatic toxicity, because I consider reproductive toxicity. It is straightforward. It is straightforward. It is achievable. It is measurable. It is relevant. Now, I did not give time. So, it is the whole work is a call for urgency. From my conclusion, I already call for the urgency that this environment still pose great threat for reproduction. Now, let's see if it pose threat as well to somatic cells, other cells in our body that does not have to do with reproduction. Is that environment toxic to it as well? That's a call to action for other researchers to carry out the study on somatic cell. So now the second one says further studies should be carried out on the generation of offsprings produced from such damaged sperm cells. Now, if people that are living in that environment for a longer time before this my study was carried out, people have been staying there, and there's possibility from the result of my study, I've seen that the place is still capable of inducing mutation even after bioremediation have been carried out. Now, people that are still staying there and they have given birth, what's the effect? What's the result? Or what's the physical change or any hormonal change or whatever kind of change that we can see that will differentiate the offspring of those ones that has the aberrated sperm cells and those that has normal sperm cells? Is there any significant difference? If there's no significant difference, which is actually going to be very rare, because if the sperm cell is damaged, then if the sperm cell still manage to fertilize an egg, it's not going to be a normal infant that will come out of that. So let's see what will be the results of the conjugation of a sperm cell that is damaged and an ova. Now, the third one says further studies should be carried out on suitable organism for bioremediation. Now, when I did my bioremediation, I used microorganisms. Now, I'm recommending that further studies should be carried out maybe on plants and animal. If plants can do the work better, or if animal can do the work better than microorganism. And the last recommendation says further studies should be carried out on the effectiveness of other forms of bioremediation. Now, okay, this number 3 now says suitable organism. Even if it is still microorganism, maybe I used E. coli for example. I'm not a microbiologist, so I don't know if E. coli is right in this my example. But let's just say, for example, if I had used E. coli, will tetanus do better in the bioremediation? Will any other microorganism do better in the bioremediation? Now, my fourth recommendation says other forms of bioremediation, which is the use of plants and the use of animals. So this will be the end of my atotonu. Apologies. If there's any question, please, I would like to take that for like 5 minutes because I have another engagement to carry out. I have another class. So please, if there's any question, you can bring it on so that we can address it together. Thank you for your attention and your attentiveness.
All right. Thank you so much. And Blessing, do you have any quick question for her before she leaves this meeting?
Okay, I think when she was trying to explain that discussion aspect, the screen was not showing here. So, and my major question is that let's say there's a variation in my own results compared to previous results that have been done. How will I relate it together? You get it, ma?
Okay, if
Janet,
I
did you
get
get
your
it?
question well, you are saying if there's a difference, let's say
Yes.
from from literature now, somebody has worked on bioremediated soil, and the person found out that then the particular soil is not capable of inducing mutation. But when you carried out your own study, you saw that it was capable of inducing mutation. You don't have to panic. It is still a research work. Now, what you have to put into consideration is what are the parameters that that person used. It might be that the period of time that that person's soil was used or that person's soil was bioremediated is longer than your own. It may be that some of the components that are still present in your own sample is not present in that person's own. So you can include in your discussion that from your own results, you found out that the concentration of this and this and this and this and that are still able to induce. Remember that in this my discussion, I mentioned, where's that place again? Please go back to the second paragraph of the discussion. Is this second paragraph now? Please hold on.
This is the second paragraph.
Okay, I'm coming, please. Okay, it's like second, the last paragraph, sorry. The last paragraph in the discussion. Yes. So yeah, now I have, even though bioremediation was effective in the reduction of this and that, some of the constituents were not reduced. That's CR and PB, they were not reduced. And this means that the method of bioremediation was not effective and could be responsible for the observed aberration. Now, there is a standard. Please, can you please mute your microphone? Okay, there's a standard concentration for all these substituents. Let's say from 1 to 100%. Maybe the standard is, let's say, 10%. And the person that carried out the study before had 10% or not even up to 10% concentration of those substituents. If 10% is not capable of inducing aberration, somebody that has 8% or 9% definitely will not have any aberrations. But when you carried out your own study, you found out that your own constituents that are still in your soil, there is still up to, let's say, 30 or 40%. Now you will be able to see the difference between your work and that person's work. Then you can include in your discussion that although so person has said that after bioremediation, there was no significant changes or significant effects of that soil on sperm cells. You can say that in your own study, you found out that the concentration was higher, hence there was mutation because of the high concentration of those materials that are still in the soil. Have I answered your question, please?
you.
I
Hello,
can't hear you.
Blessing. Blessing.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you.
You
All
said
right, please,
what?
if there's any question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Do you have any other question for her before she leaves?
No,
Or
no.
you're still thinking? Okay, all right, no problem. Thank you so much, Jeanette. Thank you for the wonderful. So
Thanks
our
for your.
next tutor is going to be all right. So our next tutor is going to be Miss Blessing Atta. So she'll be rounding up on our part from the management aspects. Hello, Miss Blessing. Miss Blessing.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So sorry.
Okay, all right. Good afternoon.
How you guys
Welcome.
Can you all hear me, please?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll be sharing my screen now. Okay. So sorry, I'm coming. It's not person I'm sharing. There is my phone. Okay. Is it there? So you can you all see my screen? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So last week we discussed the chapter 4 on how you can write research thesis for management students. Yeah. So today we'll be discussing about how you can write a summary, conclusion, and recommendation for your research thesis. I would like to emphasize on the fact that before you can say you want to write a full project for management students, yeah, you need to be very careful. I know that I haven't been so elaborate when it comes to explaining in depthly about how you can write your research, but then I will just have to give us like a brief of how you can on how you can write it again and again. But first, let us discuss on how we can write a summary, conclusion, and recommendation. That is the last part of a research thesis for us as management students. So our 5.1, that's summary. What you are asked to do here is just to give us a brief of the key findings of your research. Last week, I said something about the research depending aspect. I said for your finding section, yeah, it can be more than 5 pages. But for this 5.1, the summary section, it shouldn't be less than just 1 page. You have to give us the brief of your findings. Okay, we found out that there is a correlation between self-employment and academic performance in future. So you give us an in-depth explanation, but not more than 1 page for summary. And then your 5.2, which is your conclusion, you are to tell us what can we do exactly. Please, can you see or hear me?
Hello.
Please, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I have to confirm. So your 5.2 is your conclusion. You have to draw a conclusion based on the findings that you've gotten for your research and tell us the implication of these findings on management field. So you are concluding that this research is something worthwhile and it is something that is going to enhance the growth and development of management, and so, depending on your course. But then you need to give us a conclusion of what you've done. So I am concluding that on this research, it is very evident that business and self-employment significantly affect academic performance of students in SMART, in SEED, in FUTA generally, depending on what you want to do. So difference between summary and conclusion is just that summary, you are giving us like a 1 page thing, briefing us on your key findings. You know, we have research questions here, and your research questions can be up to 4 to 5 questions. So your findings must be based on your questions, as I've said earlier. But then your summary must give us a brief of your findings. So it can be like 5 paragraphs, one paragraph for each findings automatically. But your conclusion is just telling us that I am not concluding generally that self-employment significantly affects our current performance or not, depending on what you got. Therefore, your 5.3, which is your recommendation. So as a researcher, it's very, very expedient of you that you give us what you are going to recommend as as a bona fide or a prospective researcher in this field. So I am recommending that the government should enhance or let's say bring up programs that can change the mindset of students to put their mind into making businesses, creating business opportunities for others and all. So you just give us a recommendation of what you think we should do to government, to the state government, federal government, local governments, your schools, your private organizations, depending on what you're doing. So if it's for a science tent, probably to health organizations, to laboratories, to everything. So give us recommendations on what you found. And lastly, 5.4 is suggestion for further studies. You know, one thing about researchers is just that when you start a particular topic here, you will be very, very inquisitive to know more about it. And from there, you will get to know some other research that you like to explore. So in this 5.4, you have to give us things that we need to know. Okay, fine. I have researched on self-employment and academic performance, but I think we should also look at extracurricular activities and academic performance as well. So when I was doing that my research there, I was like, okay, fine. I think we need to look at sports. We need to look at politics intervention and involvement. So as you are trying to explore your research, in one way or the other, you will always bring up ideas will always pop up in your head to do another research related to your topic. So in this place, in this particular section, you have to give us areas for future research. What can we do in next time? Or what are you recommending for another researcher to work on based on what you've gotten? So that's all about chapter 5. And as I said earlier, for a management student, it's very easy for you to write something. You just need to focus on what you want to write and get the right materials. So lastly, we have references and appendix. I think Mr. Adebayo or Mr. Tokwe has told us some things about references here. So for us in management field, we have to use APA references style. That's what we use basically. And I'm giving us a sample of how you can write it here. It's not something very simple. Write the name of the author, the year, the topic, the journal, and the volume of the journal, and some other things you need to write, and the number of page you actually drafted that thing from. But this is actually very simple. When you get it from other PDF, just make sure that you put it in a very good references type, basically APA. And for your appendix, for management students, yeah, we are just to put our questionnaire. So the questionnaires you actually distributed, you have to give us a soft copy of it, put it in your appendix, give us what you also did. Probably you had a specific calculation that you did, just like what I told us last week about sampling and population. Yeah, sampling has formula for it. So if you have that one too, you can put it in your appendix. Give us some other calculations and some other data that you think we need to know about. So all of this can be placed or can be put in your appendix. So that is all about writing a research for management students. So I will have to recap again just in for 1 minute. So if you want to write a research for a management student, please and please, it's not something very hard. Just make sure that you get the right materials. Download PDFs based on what you have. We have academia, we have Google, we have ResearchGate, we have ScholarGate or something like that. But then you can always get all of this online. So when you get it, the places I told us that you need to use your brain. The ones that you can draft, copy and paste, use copy and paste. But basically, you cannot use copy and paste for chapter 4, 5, and yes, just 4 and 5 basically, because that is where your main research is coming from. Your 1 and 2 can still be maneuvered by trying to manipulate some things into it. But your 4 and 5 is very, very expedient. You have to use your brain and use the necessary statistical too, like SPSX, MS Excel, and that is I taught us last week. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Mr. Chris, thank you for giving us a chance and opportunity to actually speak to these students. And to all my other colleagues, Tope Adebayo, and I think Gillette, Abi, one other person took us today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for imbibing this knowledge into us. God bless you. Thank you so much. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much. Mr. Christopher.
Hello, thank you so much for the presentation. I appreciate the tutors. At the same time, thank you to the participant that was able to join us today, the person of Mr. Blessing. So while we end the class today, I know there is going to be a lot of question in the heart of the participant. And it's beyond just this class. Like I said, there is always privilege for students like this to reach out to me at their own personal leisure time so that we can also still discuss challenges they are facing in their thesis. So while we are done with the class for everything about the chapter, so next week we are going to be talking about the reference, and we are going to be discussing about graduate school application. So next week, I suppose everyone should be available, because some of the participants are not, they could not join us today, which I understand. So while we prepare to round up next week, I would expect that everyone make it to the training this Saturday. Thank you for your time, everyone, and good night.